So if you need to drop out or switch off, like it's fine, the recording will be there and you can dip in and out. I will share my own personal email at the end as well. And that's there if at any stage you think, oh, do you know, you touched on that and I wanted to ask something, but I forgot. Absolutely, at any stage. I know that sounded like I have a lot of qualifications and everything, but I genuinely don't claim to know everything, and I'm still learning every day. So I don't claim to have all of the answers, but if there is something that I can try and help you with, I absolutely will. So I'm here this evening to facilitate a webinar about returning to school and primary education. And I suppose I see it as my way of being able to help Childhood Cancer Ireland, a charity that helped my own family, and my way of giving back because I think that's really important. But I also understand and I'm very mindful of you're all at probably very different stages of your return to school journey with your child with cancer. And for every child with cancer, the return to school is going to be completely different. But I'm going to talk you through a little bit about my own personal experience, but I'm also going to talk about it from a school's perspective as well, because I think it's really important that this isn't all falling on parents to try and sort out as well, because you're already overwhelmed and you're already trying to deal with the fact that your child is going through a treatment for childhood cancer. So if at any stage as well, and I did say this to Avril, if at any stage there's something I'm talking about and you think, oh, I wonder this, that, or the other, please feel free to put it in the chat or message Avril directly and she can notify me and I can talk about that. This is a very relaxed webinar. I don't want anyone to feel that they have to write anything down or it's just a chat, and I'm speaking to you as a parent more than anything because I totally understand the journey that you're on because I have been on it myself. The school aspect is, yes, I do work in a school, but I'm speaking more as a parent this evening. I hope that's okay with everyone. So I'm just going to, I don't, there, I'm moving, sorry. So that's me. And this is my daughter, Lucy. And this photo was taken actually the week she started primary school. She was 5 years old. And Lucy, like lots of young children at 5, absolutely so excited to start school, very, very happy. And she just absolutely ran in the door every day, full of energy. These are my 4 children. And they are now 23, 20, 18, and 15, hence why I don't have a photo if anyone has old. So they do know I'm sharing this picture and they're very aware that I do talk about their journey, and Lucy is very aware that I am speaking this evening. But I wanted to explain the reason I share this photo. So this was a family holiday to Portugal in August 2014. We were what we thought were just the average family, like everyone else, with a busy house and running here and running there and dance classes and drama classes. And then 2 weeks after this photo was taken, I found myself sitting outside an operating theatre, and my daughter had been in an operating theatre for 7 hours. I didn't know then, but 5 days later, she was diagnosed with B cell acute lymphatic lymphoma. I ended up in a world that I had no idea what was coming. I sat by her bedside, not knowing she was transferred. She was in Tala Hospital and she was transferred to Crumlin. And 3 days later, she began an aggressive form of chemotherapy. So everyone's life changed, especially hers. And my goal, all I thought was, well, we'll get her through this and we'll get her back to school and everything will be okay, because we all go into that mode of what do we do, and everyone deals with this completely differently. And however, her journey back to school wasn't linear, it wasn't straightforward, and nothing really could have prepared me as a parent or her family as what was coming next. So I just think it's really important, because for me to just sit here and say, oh yeah, I know what you're going through. I actually do know what you're going through. And I do know the fear and I do know how scary it is. Navigating back to school is a really frightening part. I'm speaking about it on a primary level because I am a primary teacher and also because Lucy was in primary school at the time. Um, so I hope that just gives you a little bit of background as to my journey as a parent. And I'm going to just move on a little bit now into just that navigating that initial back to school as a family. And as I say, this is going to look different for every family. So take from this what will work for your family. this is my day. This is me. A couple of days ago, I teach in our autism class, and that's me on the floor reading a Peppa Pig story. So it all looks very calm, but there's a lot of chaos sometimes going on as well in the building. So um, just one of the first things I really want to clarify for parents, because this is something that a lot of parents have shared with me. And I think it's really, really important that parents have this information. So when a child is absent from school for over 20 days, every school in Ireland is obligated by law to report the case to Tulsa. That is by law for every school. And straight away, obviously, parents, and I know this myself, panic and think, oh my God, what is this? Like, I'm already stressed out enough and I'm getting a letter to why is my child missed 20 days? Just to explain to you very clearly, when it's a case of illness, it's treated completely differently. It's about administration, and it's about Tulsa knowing that your child actually is in treatment, which then kicks in what's called the EWO, which is the Education Welfare Officer. And in situations where your child has cancer, the Education Welfare Officer is there as a support to the family. So a lot of the time, families haven't experienced this situation before, and this is all very new. And that's why I feel it's really important, because a lot of the times when I'm talking to families, it's one of the first things they say to me. They're worried. Please don't worry about Tulsa or the EWO. These are put in place in order to support you as well. And I will explain a little bit about those supports later on. But I just wanted to start with that because it is a legal obligation on a school to report over 20 days. And it's just that you're aware of that, so that it's not that you're going into panic when if you get a letter or anything like that. I know that for families it's such a stressful time, and the panic then of that on top of it, it can be really stressful. So I wanted to just start with that, just to be very clear about that for families. So I suppose one of the first things I'm always asked is what to do as a family. What do we do? And I would always say try and inform the school as early as you can. Now, that's not an easy situation to be in. And I know myself, I phoned my daughter's school principal. I got very emotional. I thought I was fine to make the phone call, and then I got really upset and I actually hung up and I had to phone back, but if it is a case that you just think, I actually can't, I'm trying to tell everybody or I'm trying to cope myself, you can actually email the school secretary and just explain what's happened and say, I'll contact the principal in a couple of days. Well, can you just let them know what's happened? So for the school, what the school will need, and for most of your oncologist team will have and provide you with, is usually just a notice of your child is in treatment for this particular cancer and it may go on. The child may need to be in school or out of school, depending, as I say, on what treatment the child is on. As I say, the education welfare officer in this situation is a supportive role. One of the really important things that I would say to parents is when it comes time to actually go into the school to have a chat with them about your child's return to school. And that could be a lot faster for some families than it's going to be for others. So this is all about your own journey and your child's journey and figuring out what's best. So the hospital may have advised, look, no, you need to wait until they're finished this regime of chemo. Or they may say, no, actually your child's on oral chemotherapy. They actually, if they're doing okay, they can go back for an hour a day. So this is more led by your team. However, you will have to go in and speak to the school and explain this is what's happened. They're suggesting that our child could go in for an hour a day, half an hour a day, it could be 10 minutes. And I'll explain a lot more about that a little later on. One thing I would say is if you can, to bring another adult with you. So that could be a friend, it could be a sister, sister-in-law, whatever it is for you. And that's not to say that you're going to go in there and speak up for your child, but it can become quite overwhelming because you're going back into a school where you've probably had really happy memories. You've watched your child in their plays, you've brought your child in on their first day, and then you find yourself back in the school. And it can be incredibly daunting because now you're sitting down to explain that your child is on treatment or post treatment and all of those things that are going to impact your child's learning. And that can become quite overwhelming for families and for parents. So it's about being mindful of you as well in this, because sometimes, and certainly I know from lots of other parents, that we get so caught up in trying to make sure everything's going okay that we actually forget that this is actually our child, and it is a lot for parents to take on board and then to have to go and sit down and explain. It can get quite emotional. So the reason I'm saying that is you can actually have another adult with you there as a support, and you can have that other adult with you, and if it is a case that you get emotional or you forget something, they can actually say, oh, do you remember you wanted to ask about this or you wanted to ask about that, and that's perfectly fine. So it's about just having that support with you. It may be that you don't need them at all, but I know myself from having different meetings, and certainly also as a teacher, I would always say to parents, when it comes to serious illness or anything, if they ever want to bring someone with them, it's perfectly fine. Sometimes we all just need that support person there with us, and they can ask questions, or even afterwards they could say, oh, do you know, they mentioned this and you might have forgotten, because you have to remember you're trying to take in all this information all at once, while also advocating for your child's return to school, while also being incredibly worried about your child's return to school. So one of the things you can ask, if you are in a meeting with the principal or the deputy principal, it depends obviously on who you're meeting, but you can ask, do you mind if you just take a few notes so that I know afterwards what we discussed or how this is going to look for my child? So it's going to look different for every child. I know for my child it was 10 minutes a day, which was heartbreaking for her because she really liked school, but it was all she could actually manage at the time. And we had to build on that, and we had to build it up really slowly. But I know I came away from meetings and I completely forgot what we'd talked about. So that's why I'd always say to parents, even if you think, no, I don't need someone with me, just to have someone there with you, because talking about treatment and everything, it can get quite emotional for parents. You know, your whole life has changed, your life is turned upside down, and so is your child's. So you're there as their voice, and that can be tricky. So I'm just saying that that is an option for families as well. One of the things that comes up a lot for children in treatment, and it is fatigue, and the fatigue that children going through chemotherapy and radiation for childhood cancer, it is very different to just ordinary fatigue, and it can manifest its way in lots of different ways for children. So it can be how long their attention span is. They may get muddled up on following their timetable. They may get confused about where they're supposed to be. All of those things can cause a lot of fatigue in children, and we need to be very aware that when we're talking to schools, that we can explain that yes, my child is on treatment, but also my child may get quite confused, or they may get quite worried, they may get quite anxious. You know your child best, but how your child is at home and how your child is in school are two very different ways of being, and I'm going to explain a little bit about that in a couple of slides. I just want to say that, like, just to have those words that you can actually say, like, when a child is having treatment, their attention processing is definitely going to be slower. So it's important that schools have that information, and it's going to be different for every child. It can fluctuate. One of the things I would always say to parents, and I know myself, that you want your child back in school, you want them back doing homework, you want them back, and it doesn't always work out that way. And one of the most important things, and I would say that for parents, if your child is starting back in school for 10 minutes, a half an hour a day, pick a subject with the teacher that you know your child really enjoys, that they're not going to feel pressure to do. So it could be, say, your child loves doing science in school or art. I would choose that activity as their start back in activity, because this will reduce pressure on your child. It's a subject that they like to do, and it will keep their confidence. If they go back in and they're straight, say, into literacy, and they're straight into maths, and they've missed school, they can lose a lot of confidence in themselves. So schools are very accommodating when it comes to things like this. And it's about us as parents being aware, oh yeah, I know that they definitely love doing art. So maybe their first few times back in school will be that they're there for art. And, just that slow reintegration progress for your child. If it is a case that your child is going back in for a full day straight away, just ensure that they're getting regular breaks and that your child's confidence is still up, that they're not worried about they've come behind a little bit of maths or, and schools are great at actually keeping in touch with parents. And if you think at home, maybe I'll try and do a few phonics or not. Because one thing I would always say to parents, and this is across the board, I would never suggest doing anything at home that is going to cause any additional stress in the household. Homework, anything, any additional work, because homes are quite stressful sometimes. And if childhood cancer is in your home as well, that's a stressful situation. And if you know your child best and you think, if I arrive home with a pack of maths worksheets, they are going to get so upset, it's not worth it. But just ensuring that your child can access regular breaks in school if they are in on a full day. So this is a really important one. Now, some of you may have heard this before. It's called the Coke bottle theory. So I know for a lot of parents, when their child reintegrates back into school, and they may be getting messages from school saying they're settling in really well and everything's going great. And then at home, their child is actually quite upset and seems quite off when they come home. So, this, just to explain to you, can happen for a lot of children where when they're in school, they feel they have to be a certain way. And because they've only just gone back, they want to be back in with their pals. They want to be doing everything that everyone else is doing. However, they're also internally exhausted. They're going through treatment or they have just gone through treatment. And so during the day when they're in school, they're, I suppose, in a way performing. They are trying to keep up, trying to keep up, trying to keep up. And it's like, in a way, they're masking that the fact that, that they're tired or whatever else they're feeling. But when they come home, it can be completely different. And I'm mentioning this because a lot of parents would mention this, that their child comes home and they're crying, they're really angry, they're upset. And a parent is saying, well, hang on, like Miss Kelly said, you had a great day in school. I would say to parents, this is your child's way of telling you they feel so safe at home, that home is the safe place where when they come in, that overwhelming of their day, they actually can express at home. So, what I would say to parents, if your child is experiencing that, definitely talk to school and explain to them that this is happening after school, because this is a regular thing for parents. But also just even trying to find things that might help your child. So some children respond really well to things like a weighted blanket. It could be just like having a little tent in the house where they go in and they just have that 10-15 minutes to just kind of, as we'd say, just decompress, just go. There's times where you might come in from maybe being at the hospital or maybe being at a meeting and you just need that 10 minutes by yourself, or you pull in the car and you need to just sit there. So sometimes for children, when they're in treatment or they're post treatment, just their brains being able to regulate and being able to kind of just deal with all the fatigue of the day can be a lot. So we call it, I suppose, in a way, it's the Coke bottle theory. It's building up, as you shake that can of Coke or the bottle, and then it just fizzes out. But I know a lot of parents have that at home and they're worried that it's them. It's not parents. That's why I would always say that's your child telling you, I feel so safe at home that I can actually get upset. And they mightn't be able to express and tell you that's actually why. But that's why I would be very clear that clear communication with school is so important. And I know that sometimes parents can have a negative experience with school and feel that the school is not understanding what is actually happening for their child. And one of the things I suppose that I have found over the years is that schools are not given any real direction when it comes to a child being diagnosed with cancer in their school. Schools have to go and find out information, or the parent is asked to provide lots of information, and parents are already overwhelmed. So, one of the things that I suppose out of all of these things over the recent months is that there will be a free webinar for schools that will give them all this information with Childhood Cancer Ireland and with Bardstown. And our hope is that that will cut out a lot of stress, that schools can just access information to hand And that will cut out for parents being the person in the middle trying to explain, oh, you can apply for this and you can apply for that, because it's difficult enough where you're at in your journey. And I would also say, in relation to that, if you feel like you've had a negative experience with your child's school, or you feel like they're not understanding, I would say try and reach out to them again, because that communication piece is so important. It doesn't always go right straight away. And I would always say that sometimes for schools, that is fear. They've never dealt with this before and they don't know what to do and they're scared. And it's okay to say that. I have absolutely no problem in saying that, because having spoken to school principals myself, a lot of school principals will say, I just didn't know what to say. I didn't know what to do. I don't know any child that's had cancer before. And that's okay, but also then we need to provide that information so that parents don't have to be providing information for schools, that the information's there already, and hopefully that will cut out any additional stress. So this is actually my own school, my own child's school, and I remember very clearly dropping Lucy there for 10 minutes on her first day back, and she was so upset. She was so upset with me. She was really angry because she wanted to be in for a full day with all her friends, and she wasn't able. And it was really hard as a parent. I had to leave her. I went to the car. I sobbed. And then I had to go back in again with a big red blotchy face, and take her out and bring her for a hot chocolate. But I just think that emotional well-being piece for parents maybe isn't talked about a whole lot. But the fear of dropping your child into school, even though it's all you want them to have their life back. But that is also incredibly daunting as a parent, because we all know that schools, have hundreds of children in the building. There's lots of infection in schools, and we're now all on high alert for infection because our child is in treatment. So, around that whole emotional well-being piece is you as a parent or guardian. You are really important here. And it's something that I think isn't spoken about enough, because the whole road is to get the child back to school, and whatever way that looks like, and we'll support the child and we'll do everything. But also, parents need support in this. It can actually be incredibly lonely, because you mightn't have been at the school for months, you mightn't have seen anyone, you mightn't want to talk to anybody. You're trying to deal with all these different things. So just, and I kind of probably wish that someone had said that to me back then, because I was incredibly hard on myself as a parent. And I suppose I was very on my own in this. I probably didn't talk about it enough myself, and also the emotional impact for your children, because they mightn't have been in school for months. I know, like, Lucy hadn't been in school for over 7 months, and that was a long time to go back in. She was very excited, but it did become quite overwhelming for her after a few days. So it's just about being aware. We talk about this as, it's great they're going back to school, but there's actually a huge emotional piece there for parents and for children. And it's about being aware of that, that if you find yourself getting upset, that's okay. You've just been through, and you're going through an incredibly stressful journey that nothing in life could have ever prepared you for. So just be nice to yourself in all of this as well, because I think sometimes as parents or guardians, we can be really hard on ourselves and we just keep going and keep going, but we need to mind ourselves as well in this. So, just talking about that, like driving away from school, it's so different when your child is in hospital. There's doctors, there's nurses, it's a very safe, sterile environment. And then you find yourself being back at the school, and you're very aware that the school is not a sterile environment. There are not doctors and nurses working in the school. And your child may be returning to school like my child was, with a central line and wearing a mask, which back then was before COVID. So it was a very different time, So just your concern about infection, the anxiety around infection and how infection control is in a school, that's okay. It's okay to also ask the school to talk about infection, to ask parents to notify the school. Like, it doesn't take a lot for a school to send out a message to say, just to be aware, if your child has, let's say, chickenpox, we all know how dangerous that is if your child is on treatment, or if your child has a vomiting bug, not to send them into school, but also that if your child has been exposed to a case of chickenpox, you need to know that, and the school need to know that. So it's about the school having that information to hand as well. As I say, I just feel that parents having to give all that information is very stressful. But just having that relationship with a school that you can actually say, look, if my child is in contact with a child with any serious illness or any infection, I need to know as a parent, because we need to get in and get our bloods done, or whatever the protocol is for your child. But this is about you being your child's voice and your child's advocate, that you can ask the school to contact you. It's not that they're going to break any GDPR or anything. They're not going to be getting into who it is or anything, but you do need to know. It's very, very serious if any of our children that are in treatment for cancer are in contact with any infection. So for you as a parent to ask that, that's okay. Reminding that, like, good ventilation, that all the children are hand washing. They're things that, we would do in our classrooms anyway, but maybe that could just be a general reminder for all classes during an assembly. Our school do it on a regular basis, and it it's not noted. It's just seen as normal school, that we are aware of infection and things like that. But it can be just a reminder to a school that, this is a very serious illness as well. And we also need to be very aware as a staff that we are aware that a child is having treatment, and that all of these things are on protocol. And also then that if your child needs a little break from the classroom, that an area is facilitated for your child. So, your child may need a few minutes every day, and I'll talk a little bit about that and what access is available for your children as well. But just to say, that whole part of separation anxiety, it is completely normal. It's like your child starting school in a way, but starting all over again in a whole other way. So you leaving your child in what we feel is very vulnerable situation. So it's very different to being in Crumlin Hospital and going down for a coffee if you get the chance, and coming back because you know your child is there with staff. But leaving your child at the school door is a completely different experience. So it's just about acknowledging that and being aware of that as a parent, that separation anxiety for you can actually be overwhelming, but it is actually normal. You have been with your child. I was in isolation for months with Lucy, and then I found myself not being with her. And that was very scary, and I didn't really understand why I was feeling that way. I understand that now. But it's just that if you are on this journey, that you're aware that that's okay if I feel that way. It's all right. And I always think that your anxiety in this situation, it's just reflecting what's just happened. What has just happened in your life is completely life changing, and it's changed your life, your child's life, your family's life. So to be anxious with your child going back to school is perfectly normal. And if you're not feeling anxious, that's okay too. I'm not saying you have to be, but just so that you're aware, if you are feeling worried or concerned, that's okay as well. Sorry. And just to say, in relation to social reintegration is kind of what we would call it. And if your child has been missing from school for, maybe weeks, maybe months, maybe years for some children, that social reintegration part is really, really big. And it can be a really big concern and a really big worry for you as a parent as well, because they may not have seen their friends. So I suppose now things are a little bit different, which is fantastic in a way, because technology wise, we can now contact each other a lot more easier. So if it is that your child isn't back to school, but they have a pal in school or a pal outside school, even if you could arrange like a FaceTime or a Zoom, and it could be just for a couple of minutes, your child could be showing them their favourite latest toy or whatever it is, your child best. But just to keep that little bit of contact going for your child and also for their friends, so that they can see them and see that they're doing okay. Just that little point of contact can be really, really crucial, especially when they're going back to school, because some children can't return for a full school day, as I've mentioned, and just Zoom or FaceTime with friends. Now, this will depend on your child's age and where they're at, and you know them best. Possibly if it is a visit with a friend before they go back to school, even if it's a case of just going for a little walk, or, like, as I say, your child, you know what they're like, you know what they're able for as well. And you also know which friends or friends' parents that you think, I could actually reach out to them, and they've already texted me 100 times to see can they do anything to help. So maybe I'll actually say, could we actually meet? Maybe it'd be good for my child, because the social part is a huge part for our children. They have missed out on quite a lot of time with their friends and their peer group. And when they go back to school, some of those the friend group may have changed in the classroom. And that can be really upsetting for children. So it's just about being mindful of that, because you're already so caught up in everything else that you're not really thinking, oh, well, sure, when they go back, they'll still be sitting beside this child and that child. It may have changed. So that's where your class teacher can actually advise you or say to you, oh, yeah, well, actually, those two children are no longer as buddies as they were. And, so that's where your communication piece of finding out what's actually happening. Or if there's little things that are happening, you think your child might be able for that are school related, and you think, it would be really nice if we could pop down to sports day, even just for half an hour, even just to see their friends. That little part is really important for children. And that kind of social stamina, it just really rebuilds children and their own little confidence in themselves, because they get to see their friends. And it's just a really important part. This is just what supports are actually available and what practical supports are available in primary schools in Ireland. Now, this will depend on your school and also on your child's needs and what needs that they may have post cancer treatment or while during cancer treatment. So I've just done these out in a very simple list, because I really don't want to bombard parents with lots of information. So most schools have SET support, so that's a special education teacher. And the special education teacher is someone that's there to support all children who may have different needs at different stages in their school journey. So I've worked as an SET teacher myself many years, and I've actually worked with children who were in treatment. And so just to be aware that, like, if maybe you've talked to your school and they've said, oh, the SET teacher is coming along, that's who the SET teacher is, and they are there as a support to you. They may be your link to the school, that'll be the one person that you're linking with, as opposed to trying to email or contact lots of people. If your child has care needs and they need SNA support, that may be available in your school as well. If your child needs a reduced timetable, that is something that all schools will facilitate. And as I say, work it around what works best for your child, what works best for you as a family as well. Reduced homework or no homework at all. That's where you might feel, do you know what, actually, I'd really like my child to be doing homework, because I'd like to keep up with what they're actually doing in the class. And as I say, if you think that numeracy and literacy, they may have found they fell behind a little bit, you could ask the teacher or the school to give you a little bit of extra in that way. But as I say, just find the time when it's right for your child, and make sure that your child's not feeling overwhelmed with too much school related work as well. As I mentioned, infection safeguards, school being aware of what they need to inform you about, and then also just having that regular contact with school. So our school use the class dojo system. As I mentioned, I'm in an autism class, so I would message parents on a daily basis, or I would phone them in situations where a child is on treatment for cancer. I would think that that relationship is really, really important for parents. I also think that for a parent to know that they can get a message from school to say, look, here's, let's say, Sive and they're painting, for a parent to see that, that's huge. So just to have that contact, and also to be able to review, if you think actually they're managing an hour a day, could we maybe try an hour and a half next week, or could they be there for lunch, whatever it is. And sometimes it's lunch and break, though those little social occasions actually are the best way in for a child. As I say, it really does depend on your child, and you know them best as well. So, just in relation to, for some families, the return back to school mightn't be straightforward, and they may actually have to look at accessing home tuition. And sometimes parents feel really upset that, why can't my child just go back to school? But that could be just down to, unfortunately, the treatment that your child is on. So just to give you a little overview of, home tuition is available for children who are medically unable to attend school. And this grant is through the Department of Education, and it is applied through by the school. And this is where your education welfare officer could support you as well, or your school principal of the school that your child is in. And it always applies when a child is in a recognised primary school and is medically able to or attend full time. So that could be that your child is accessing some time in school and then you could get additional support at home. So home tuition, and I've worked as a home tutor before, is the teacher would come to your home and work with your child for maybe half an hour a day, depending on what your child and what their needs are. And I suppose for me, building a relationship with a child is really, really important in that situation. You are fully supported and you're also guided in relation to where you can access a home tutor. So please don't feel that if you're in a situation where you're told, look, your child isn't ready to go back to school or they're only partially going back to school, the home tuition grant is there to support you as a family. So the child does remain enrolled in their school and it doesn't replace school. It's just there, I suppose, as an in between, and it's a temporary support for your child. And the school stays involved, and it also can be used in relation to partial attendance to school as well. So just because I have heard this from parents that they felt like they were failing their child by applying for home tuition, I would say absolutely not. You're actually supporting your child by applying for home tuition. And it's not, it can be really difficult if you know that your child can't actually physically go into school for a certain amount of time. So just think of this as somebody coming to support your child in the home. And it can be done in a really fun way, like if your child likes playing games or whatever way it is, so just to be aware, it's just a protective step. And if a hospital has recommended that your child isn't to return to school yet, this is an option for families as well. And just in relation to the transition to post-primary and the transition to post-primary school for all sixth class children, fifth and sixth class sometimes, is a really stressful situation. So when a child is in treatment for cancer or post-treatment for cancer, it really does add an extra layer of concern and worry for children and also for parents, because they're going from having one class teacher to 6 to 8 class teachers in post-primary, changing subjects every 40 minutes to an hour, having to go to a locker and change things. So what I would say to parents is try and prepare your child as early as you can. Reach out to the post-primary school and ask, can you visit? And then ask, can you visit with your child? Meet the special education needs officer in the post-primary school and explain what's happened. And just give your child the time for a gradual adjustment. So I would do, in our primary school, we would do a slow transition to post-primary for lots of children who are concerned about starting post-primary. So we would visit the post-primary school with a group of children and we would go around getting used to the layout, getting used to the lockers, getting used to the timetables, all of those changes, because it is a huge change for all children. But if your child is post treatment or in treatment, and the anxiety of moving schools and lots more new people, so just reach out if you can to your school class teacher and then the post primary school that you are hoping your child is going to attend. So just to be aware, and just to go over that, recovery for all of our children is not linear. It's going to be different for every child, and fatigue will fluctuate. So just being aware that one day your child may be full of energy and the next day they may be just completely floored. But you as their parent know them best, but also having that communication with school open so that the teacher can ring you at any stage if they think, oh, they're just not in as good form as they were and they seem really tired, that you know that and you can collect them early. Building confidence back in children does take time, and it's just really important to be aware of that, because sometimes we expect our child to just go back to who they were and it does take a long time. So it's just about being aware and giving your child that time for them to have the confidence. And as I say, they may be masking it and going in the morning all happy, but by the time they get home they may be drained and upset. So it's just being aware of that. And all of the expectations, everything can be adjusted. So it's not linear, so it can be changed at any time. And it's about you being aware as well. This is working, this isn't. And about just trying to keep that communication system open with the school. And supports can evolve. So if you think that, look, my child's just not really coping, they need more breaks out of the classroom. So if that support is needed, that can be made available. And then to think of those plans changing as your child is getting stronger. And that's a really important part. So one of the most important things I think is just to follow your child's energy and not the calendar. So try and not get caught up in they have to be in every day, they have to be in every day. If they don't manage one of the days, that's okay. It is okay. So it's just about being aware that you don't feel under pressure and that your child doesn't feel under pressure that they have to be in, because there is that concern and worry. And that's where I go back to that whole part of the EWO or Tulsa. It's just about you being aware you are following your child's energy, not a calendar. So it's just really important to be aware. One of the other programs that I wanted to mention, and we know that Childhood Cancer Ireland have mentioned this before, is that Barrettstown do run a program for primary schools and post primary schools, and they actually go into the school and they talk to schools about their child returning to school. And I just think it's a really important program that we need to all be aware of. And I just have the objective, I suppose, is just to create and interact with children, and that's done on lots of different levels depending on the child's age. Just to let you know that I spoke to Paula, and she has said if anybody wanted to contact her in relation to this, her email is there, and I know Childhood Cancer Ireland have her details as well. But I just said I'd put it on the screen just so that it's there for families going forward as well. That it is a programme that your child's school can get involved with, if you feel it would be beneficial for your school. So that's a little bit about that programme. And then there were just a couple of questions that I know have been sent to Mairead, and I'm just going to answer them very briefly. So I don't know, Laura, if you wanted to stop the recording there.
Yeah, I'll stop it here now. Um,